Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're going to be taking a look at Final Girl, designed by AJ Partifrio and Evan Derrick, and published by Ryder Games. In Final Girl, you take the form of the titular Final Girl. You're going to be doing your best in order to rescue as many hostages as you can, upgrade into your superpower, and hopefully defeat the villain who's rampaging the location that you choose. Now let's quickly go into a setup of the game and an overview of how it's played. Now the reason I want to talk about the setup in particular is each time you play, you're going to pick a feature film box, and these feature films actually feature the box as part of the game. You're going to pull off the lid here, and that's going to either be your location or the killer itself. And so you'll simply unattach that magnetized portion and put it out onto the game board. Now, after you decide where you're fighting and who you're fighting, you're going to take your Final Girl and your set of action cards and put them out here. You'll also have a setup card, some item decks, and then this 10-card terror deck that you'll be using to actually play the game. Lastly, you pull out an event that's going to change up the game. In this case, we got Fresh Meat, which is going to put some extra victims on the board. Now that you actually have your characters, you begin the game. You start the game with all of these level 0 cards, and these level 0 cards here are going to provide you with lots of options. Now, first off, you can just get rid of a card in order to increase your time marker down here. When you increase your time, this is again to increase the options that you have when it comes to purchasing new cards for your hand, or when it comes to actually triggering some of the effects of cards. For example, some may have costs in time in addition to their other effects. So you have lots of choices when it comes to playing or committing, or actually just saving cards for later. You have many choices when it comes to that. Now that being said, on your turn you can play as many of these as you want, and when you do, you'll do a horror check. For example, say I play this focus card. I'm going to look at my current horror rating, so I have 2 dice, I'll roll the dice, and based on what I get, it'll either be nothing, these commit cards, where you'll take 2 cards and you can turn it into the success, and successes are what you want. For each success, you get some type of bonus here. So for example, if I had 1 success, I would get to reduce my terror level. And then if you also get 2 successes, you get an even better ability. So the higher that your horror is, the less dice you roll, but the lower, the more dice you roll, because you are not afraid of this thing that you're fighting. And that's really the core of the game. You'll be playing cards and triggering their effects. But what can these cards do? Well, we talked about focus, decreasing that horror. You can move around the map with walks, you can heal with short rests, and you can also do attacks on the different characters on the board. And that's the whole goal of the game. You are trying to reduce the health of your killer to 0. After you're done playing your action cards, you'll go into the purchase phase. And this is where you can go ahead and start buying more cards to add to your hand. You spend your time here, and that allows you to pay for the cost of the cards and use them for the next round. These can include things like searching, where you're able to get different item cards, sprinting, where you're able to move around the board, or these special blue reaction cards, where you can actually do things on the enemy's turns. You have lots of choices here, and they increase in cost the stronger the card is. So you have a lot of cool choices when it comes to building your hand of action cards. Now that you've taken your turn and you've collected some new cards, you'll go to the villain's phase, where he is going to have some sort of special ability that is listed on their card. For example, Hans here, if he's in a space with a different character, he's going to attack that character. So each of the villains is going to have something that they do differently, and as the game progresses, they could even increase in potency and power. So this guy becomes darker, darker, darkest. Very, very scary. Now, after the character does his move, you'll reveal a terror card, which has all sorts of opportunities for ruining your day. For example, maybe putting new victims out, or increasing your horror rating, or doing all sorts of other mayhem to the board. This could have to do with the terrain itself, or with the boss themselves, as the terror cards are actually made of a mix between the cards from the camp and the cards from the Hans set. So based on the combination of killer and location, you'll have a completely different terror deck, which is fantastic. During the villain phase, if they're ever able to kill one of these victims, you'll increase their bloodlust marker, and eventually that bloodlust will get all the way to the top and unlock their dark power, which may give them some sort of supernatural ability that's going to affect you negatively through the game. Now that being said, your whole goal is to rescue those victims, and that way you unlock your own special power, and then you can do your best to take out Hans before everyone else is taken out. Now that we've gone over a brief overview of the game, let's go ahead and talk about my positives. The first positive I want to talk about are the updated cards. Now, if you're unfamiliar, this game is actually based off of Hostage Negotiator, which uses a similar card system, but this version adds a board as well as some other thematic touches. And that being said, a lot of these cards are familiar from the original game, but the best part about this is you actually are able to fail forward a lot of the times. There are some new failing options on these cards. For example, on walking, if you succeed, excellent. You get to move 2 spaces, you pay some time, you can move 1 space, pay some time, but if you fail, you still have the options to move spaces, which I think is fantastic. You have flexible options when it comes to failing, and also the dice themselves have also been updated. You have 2 success sides on the 6 and the 5, but now there are 2 of these sides, the 4 and the 3, that allow you to commit 2 cards in order to turn them into successes. I love the flexibility with the new cards and choosing those multiple options, and I love that you're able to progress through the game without feeling absolutely devastated when you fail a test. I really like these different options here, and I think they're really healthy for the game and are going to keep you coming back and not feel like you're really just at the mercy of the dice rolls as opposed to your dice rolls and decisions. The next positive I want to talk about are the smooth systems of the game as a whole. This is the turn summary. You have your action phase, you play your stuff. You have your planning phase, you get new action cards. And then you go to the killer phase where they do their action, you draw a card, and that's really it. You then have a couple of upkeeps and panics, but other than that, you are consistently playing this game. The icons make sense, the system is good and smooth. I just love the way it all flows together, and the system is very cyclical and is going to keep you engaged the entire time you're playing this game. The next positive I want to talk about is actually about the final girls themselves. I love that you can pick any final girl and plug it into any scenario, and I love how different they are. First off, they have different starting healths, different abilities that you'll get when you actually rescue hostages, which I think is awesome, so you'll be triggering lots of cool effects as you play that are going to be varied, and each of them also has their own special item, except for the vignette one, but each of them will have an item that you can play with in each round and have an item that's special per that character. For example, if you use Adelaide here, you can use her bat and shield, which is super interesting. And on top of that, each character's special ultimate ability is really unique and fun, and I just think these are all worth exploring and all offer a new challenge or just a new way to play the game. Really love the artwork on these as well, and just the flavor that they ooze. Can't wait to jump in and try all of the different combinations with all of the different final girls. The next positive is the board play. I think this brings a really nice flavor to the game where you have different locations that you can search for items. You have different named areas that are going to interact with different events, and I love just being able to make plans. You'll also have ways that you can interact with the map based on your movement cards, as well as specific items and tokens that may show up as you play. So I really love that there's lots of things to think about with positioning and tactics, as well as reacting to where the killer could be at any time. Speaking of items, I love the different item cards in the game. During the game, you're going to have decks of cards that are face up that give you a sneak peek at the different locations that you can actually go to pick them up. You have one-shot effects that can come in handy in a pinch. You have items that you can actually equip and you deal extra damage with. And then you even have items that are going to spawn tokens onto the board, which I think is super neat. And a lot of these items are scenario specific, so you'll have items that interact with the board in really unique and interesting ways. I also really enjoy just the search cards in general, how you're always able to get an item when you need one. You have some failing options, as I mentioned earlier in the updated cards, and I think this is really cool that you are guaranteed to get these items and guaranteed to get them out, but it may cost you something if you roll poorly, but there's always that option and that failing forward. The next positive has to be just the overall flavor in the game. From the different killers and their different abilities to their superpowers, you have just so much flavor that's oozing through every aspect of this game. One of those big thematic touches are these final death tokens. When this is your last health, or when the killer has their last health, you're going to be running on adrenaline and you'll get extra dice whenever you're resolving things. Now, in addition to that, when you're actually killed, you'll reveal that token, and if it has any health on the back, you are revived. This offers just a really fun thematic twist to the game, and for a game that is short and has a lot of luck, I think this is just a very nice twist to add an additional challenge and some excitement. I think this is done extremely well. I think it plays extremely nice. There's a lot of little touches here that are like that, like this small token, and I think that makes for a really fun thematic experience. Continuing on with the flavor, the different feature film boxes are just chock full of interesting variety and unique mechanics when it comes to the items or the way that the different killers work. For example, one of my favorites here is Dr. Fright. I love how when you're fighting him, you'll have these asleep cards. We'll be drugged to his boiler room, and he's just gonna kind of pop out here, and his little head sticks out, and it cracks me up. But I love the way that you're kind of mitigating these risks and trying to figure out where he's going to pop up and attack you. I really like this mechanic and the way that they work. They're simple to integrate, and once you know the core of the game, it's going to be really easy to jump into these and give them all a try. I really like the way this works, and each of the killers comes with their own specific, unique gimmicks, mechanics, and just really fun things to explore. Now that being said, let's go ahead and dive into some of the negatives. Now the first negative has to do with storage. These feature film boxes are kind of a pain if we're being honest. You have to make sure that the packaging stays nice because these are your actual boards. In addition, the inserts that come inside do not actually accommodate any card sleeves, so you actually have to do some cutting, as you saw in our organization video for this game. So you'll have to do some cutting for the cards that they fit, and a lot of the times you're going to have a lot of empty space because some of these don't even have tokens or anything. Now they did say that potentially in the next Kickstarter there may be some things that they add, but I find this to be more annoying than it is, and you actually cannot carry this portable very well. It's going to be kind of a nuisance to bring all the variety. I really appreciated it in the original hostage negotiator system where you had a box that could contain everything. It was super easy to pull out things and kind of plug and play. Unfortunately, this is not the case because the boxes make up the game board and the killer board. The next negative has to do with a lack of variety in the action cards. Everything in this game has so much variety. The terror cards, the event cards, the maps, the monsters, the final girls. But your action cards, this is it. There are no major differences to the action cards. Now, some of the expansions will add additional cards that you can use to interact with the different mechanics in the game. Like Inkanyamba here has a way that you can interact with the Divine Wrath mechanics and kind of go up and down this track. But most of the time, these are it. This is how you attack things. This is how you retaliate. These are the basic cards you're going to start with every time. For a game that prides itself on its differentiation, its modularity, and its different varied setup, I find myself wanting more of these cards. But that being said, this is kind of a double-edged sword because another negative is actually the setup time of the scenarios. You have a lot of small bits that you're going to be needing to put on the board. It does take a while to set up, and it does take up quite a bit of table space. The last negative has to do with the difficulty of the game itself and potential difficulty spikes. There's a lot of randomized elements in the game, from the event cards to the dice themselves to the health and that final token that can all add to the difficulty of your experience. Sometimes you may just have a situation that is unwinnable. A couple tarot cards come out, it may have a super ability that really hinders you and you can't do anything about it, and certain combinations of the different feature film boxes can put you in a position that feels very frustrating. That is a huge thing to be aware of in this game, and if that's not something that you're comfortable with, then I would probably suggest to stay away from this. It can feel a little demoralizing at times when you're just getting negative after negative applied to you, and I think that's something that you need to be aware of when playing this game, is sometimes those situations just happen, and that happens a lot when there's a lot of randomized elements. All in all, I think that Final Girl boasts a fantastic amount of horror-themed variety in a setting that I find extremely fun to interact with and play. I love the action system. I love being able to have so much agency over my character while there are still so many randomized elements happening. I love the different options when it comes to succeeding and failing, and I love the customization of the cards, the items, and the different characters and the setup of the scenarios itself. I give Final Girl an 8 out of 10, and I recommend it to anyone who enjoys a game with some randomness, but really thematic, fun gameplay. The gameplay structure is wonderful, and I think it's going to be one that you find yourself coming back to again and again, trying all of those different feature film packs and mixing and matching to your heart's content. And those are my thoughts on Final Girl. What do you think of the game? Is this one that you're interested in playing? Which Final Girl do you want to give a try? Which horror setting do you want to see in the future? I'd love to hear what you think. But thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.